Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I have two very special guests with us today on our YouTube channel. Apologizing for my voice. I was yelling a little too loud at a basketball game last night, but this is real life in advocacy world. So I would like to introduce Leslie Ferris Yerger. She is CEO and founder of My Density Matters. Very thrilled to have you here today, Leslie, and Siobhán Freeney, who is our advocate friend in Europe, who started the organization and website www.beingdense.com. So we're going to talk today about breast density, which is, I know, a very important topic in the breast cancer space. In fact, I myself had dense breasts before I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So I knew that that put me at a higher risk. And then for me personally, for my story, I was a previous cancer survivor that had radiation treatment to my breasts. So between having radiated breasts and dense breasts, I was monitored very carefully because I was considered a high-risk patient. And we're here today to talk about breast density because that's not always the case with patients. And it's a really important topic we need to discuss to make sure that women really know their breasts, really know about breast density, and then what we can do to kind of navigate through how to monitor and just check and make sure we're doing all the right things to keep ourselves safe and healthy. So let's take it away. Leslie, I'll have you introduce yourself.
Thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate being asked to be here and to share my story and hopefully save a life. Or more than one, hopefully. So again, Leslie Ferris Yerger, I'm CEO and founder of My Density Matters. And the story begins for me almost 5.5 years ago now. Whoop, whoop, 5-year mark. I was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer 2 months after an all clear mammogram and ultrasound.
Wow.
Shock of my life. Who knew? It was an incidental finding because I did a routine DEXA scan just to see, postmenopausal, to see where the bones were. Had nothing to do with cancer, but they saw something weird in the DEXA scan. So then, one thing leads to another. 5 or 6 weeks pass, tests, wait, we don't know, do another test, all of that. Finally got to the point where needed to do a bone biopsy. We did a bone biopsy and it came back metastatic breast cancer. And I kind of didn't almost believe it because it didn't make sense.
Right.
Right. I just had an imprint, so that can't be. I mean, this can't be right. So I decided to go to the Mayo Clinic for a second opinion. And sure enough, pretty quickly, they did confirm the diagnosis. Yes, I do have metastatic breast cancer. And how could that have happened? Because I have dense breasts. And, so there the journey began. So I took a year to get used to my new reality. And I walked the Camino de Santiago. We won't spend a lot of time on that, but it's a pilgrimage across Spain. Really, you can start anywhere in Europe, but a lot of Irish people do the Camino. I met a bunch of really fun Irish people on the trail. Wrote a book about it called Probably Benign. And then that wasn't enough for me. I wanted to do more and more and more. So we formed My Density Matters. And now our mission is to empower women everywhere to know their breast density and learn their options and advocate for themselves. We are not near having this be standard of care where all women are taken care of just because we have dense breasts properly. We aren't there. And it's kind of a mess out there. Some states have, better laws than others. Doctors are in varying degrees of knowledge about this. The OBGYN community in the United States doesn't recommend anything additional for women with dense breasts. So we're all over the place in the United States. So we have to advocate for ourselves. And that's what we do at My Density Matters. And that's what we're all about.
I love it. Yeah. I love it. I love that you have taken your situation and then turned it into something positive that could help another woman that comes after us, right? That's what our advocacy work is all about.
Absolutely. Thanks
for sharing that, Leslie.
Yeah.
Siobhán, tell us your story. How did you get?
Oh, first of all, it's so really lovely to be sitting here with the two of you. I feel like we're all in the one room. You know, it's lovely, a nice vibe. And Leslie, I've met Robin just once before on Zoom, but Leslie, it's really lovely to meet you because I've read.
And likewise.
Yeah, we've been following each other for quite some time on social media.
Absolutely.
Look, I was diagnosed in 2015 in December with stage 3C, lobular breast cancer. And it was within 6 months of having had a clear mammogram. But not just one clear mammogram. In Ireland, women over 50 are offered a free mammogram every 2 years as part of the screening program. So I had, first of all, I'd had a breast biopsy back in, 5 years earlier on the same breast, I should add, because of a palpable, I'll just call it a palpable area. That I'd been kind of monitoring myself. I'd had it checked out in my 40s. I'd been told that they were benign cysts. Nobody mentioned terms like benign breast disease or fibroglandular tissue or dense breasts. Those were things that I knew absolutely nothing about at all. That I came to learn about them, in the last 7-8 years since my diagnosis. But I as a woman who felt she was taking care of her health and monitoring and doing everything possible, although there was no history of breast cancer in the family, I might add. There were other cancers in the family, yes, but not breast cancer. But I really honestly felt that I'd started early with a group of other women, all like-minded. We thought, well, we'll be all over this. So if anything should develop, it'll be early. We'll catch it early. But no, it wasn't to be. It wasn't early. It was, it was something that it was an intuitive gut feeling that although I'd had a clear mammogram and several of them, 4 in fact, in 5 years, along with a biopsy and ultrasound, I just wasn't happy, and I was watching and monitoring. And on one occasion, as I stepped out of the shower, I just happened to look down as I was toweling myself off, and I saw a tiny little tug, in my nipple. So it was as though somebody had put a top stitch, and pulled it forward. And then I thought, that's not something I'd noticed before, but it wasn't sore, it had no, just didn't have any of the classic signs of breast cancer. And I kind of reassured myself initially by saying, well, you've had your clear mammogram, you've been to your GP several times about, this palpable area. Everybody's assured me that it was fine. So I think it took about another week. And then I thought, no, a conversation in work sparked something, triggered something in my head. And I thought, look, I'm going to go and get this looked at again. An ultrasound, fresh pair of eyes, another pair of hands, perhaps, just let's look at this again. And an almost immediate diagnosis. So what I would say is there's no right or wrong way to kind of steer yourself through a cancer diagnosis of any stage, let alone a late stage one. And Leslie, my oncologist, said to me subsequently, be grateful that you're not stage 4, because had I not spotted that, that little tiny little visual sign, it would have been another 18 months before my next mammogram, and I would for sure have, well, there's no way of knowing for sure, okay, but almost certainly been in your situation. It had already traveled into all of my axillary nodes, not all, some of, they removed all of them. And then it had traveled into the internal mammary nodes as well. Mm-hmm. So it was on the, we both have lobular breast cancer.
Yes.
And we know that that's intrinsically difficult to see on standard mammography, but it's almost impossible when you add in this whole issue of dense breasts. So when I was diagnosed, nobody was talking about it. at all. There was no information. I think people thought that I was going a little bit, you know, doolally, as we'd say over here. There's lots of expressions.
Yeah.
But just, you know, just dense breast, what, you know, and why wouldn't I just, you know, have my chemotherapy, have my surgery, do my radiotherapy, and get well, and stop going on about this incessantly. But there was just no way I was going to give up on it. The first person I heard talk about it with any clarity was the wonderful late Dr. Nancy Capello. And personally, I couldn't have this conversation without bringing her into it, because, you know, she started the grassroots movement in Connecticut in 2004. And it was from her that I learned about breast density and the significance of it. And she encouraged me to keep going, you know, even when I felt no one was listening. So that's it in a nutshell, really, for me. That's my story. It's not what I do, but it's my story.
Yeah. What I love about both of your stories is there was some women's intuition there to do something different. Like in your case, Siobhán, you were like, I'm not feeling comfortable with what they're telling me. I mean, they gave you the all clear, but you just had that intuition. You know, as a patient advocate that's a 3-time cancer survivor, one of my biggest gut feeling moments are the ones that I've always felt led to follow. And I really just urge patients that if it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't sound right, if it's not sitting well with you, get a second opinion, get a third opinion. And like Leslie, in your case, you know, people were telling you like you could just move on, but you felt led, you felt called because you knew there was something missing in this huge puzzle piece and you had to do something about it. And I just have so much respect and admiration for both of you ladies for, you know, it's hard sometimes because even navigating through cancer itself is a difficult journey, but then to also take on more work for yourself and step into a world where we are, you know, when there's, excuse my voice, when there's not a lot of information about these topics, we are tended to be gaslit and made to feel like we're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean this thing about dense breasts? But that gut intuition tells us to do something different, to press further, to research further, to dig deeper. And because of that, you ladies are saving lives, not just 1 or 2 lives, thousands of lives by getting this information out there and working with the medical community to, you know, better understand these issues. So that was one of my first questions, just listening to you ladies talk, because I feel like some women are given that false sense of security because they had the all clear mammogram, you know, and then to wait 18 months and find out devastating news, like it's not acceptable. So who do you feel is most open to working with and researching ways to navigate through dense breasts? Because I know, I'm curious with both of you, did you work more with a GP? Was it more your OBGYN, or was it your breast cancer doctors and your breast surgeons who were kind of helping you and pushing you along and directing you where to find the best information?
Well, it's odd in a way, because I heard you saying, Robin, at the start there that you knew you had dense breasts. Okay. Now, as a younger woman, you would have had biologically dense breasts, but in Ireland, women don't start their breast cancer screening until 50. And I think, you know, I'm pretty sure that some of the logic or the reasoning behind that, you know, starting at 50 was to do with the fact that women's breasts would be less dense. That was the theory, that as you went into your menopause, your breasts would become less dense. But actually, for 40 to 50% of women, that's not the case. Okay, so initially when I asked the questions, it was of the breast screening program, because that's where I was now. I was over 50 when I was diagnosed. And I took a I took a news cutting from Nancy Capello, one that she wrote, which seemed to be and was, as I now know, evidence-based. There were lots and lots and lots of research papers going back, decades, as Nancy often said, decades of research. But women just weren't being told about it. So when I brought this into our breast cancer screening program, I was told emphatically no, that I did not have dense breasts, and that my breast density had nothing to do with what I was querying as in a late diagnosis. So it had to have been, in my head, a late diagnosis because, my quest was to find as much information as I could. So A, there was nothing available on breast density, and B, there was nothing available on lobular. So I started to do a two-pronged approach. And I discovered that lobular breast cancer, the classic lobular diagnosis, is a slow growing. Mine was. So how could I have a 7-centimeter tumor 6 months after a clear mammogram if the mammogram was indeed clear? So I went straight to the screening program. Anyway, that's the answer I got there. I subsequently got so I started chemotherapy, neoadjuvant chemotherapy, which is extremely tough, as we all know. Anybody who's been through it, it's no picnic. And as I was going through that, I was, gathering more and more and more information and talking to people. And so I decided to have a second opinion from a surgeon. So I was having my surgery within a month of stopping chemo or finishing chemo. And it was he really who I think he kind of saved me psychologically, because he looked at me when I asked him how long had the tumor been there. And up until then, I had been told 6 months, 12 months, somebody said 2 years. So that they were playing around with, something that I think they felt I might feel was acceptable. But when I asked him, he said 6 to 8 years. And I looked at him and I didn't say I knew, but deep down I did know. Because I knew what I was being told didn't add up. It didn't match the research. It didn't link into all of those studies that had been done on both density and then what I was finding out about classic lobular. So I didn't have an aggressive form of breast cancer. I had invasive lobular, but it's not an aggressive form of breast cancer. And Leslie, you've also got lobular. So chances are yours was there for, who knows?
A decade. I asked the same question. And the truthful answer, once I got to it, was probably about a decade.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I had no symptoms. I didn't have that little pulling and, that sort of thing that often happens, but not always. I didn't have any of it. It's not that I didn't see it. It was that no one could see it because it wasn't there.
But
yeah.
Have you looked, Leslie, at your imaging? Yeah, I'm sure you have.
Yeah.
So when I look at my last mammogram prior to my diagnosis, my last screening mammogram, it's so obvious to me, and I'm not a radiologist and I'm not a medical person, but from the information and the learning, if you like, that I've done as a lay person, as a patient, it's so obvious. If I put it up there on the wall for a room full of people to look at, they would all say, wow, that's an extremely dense breast.
It's a dense breast. And, they went back and looked at everything after the, roundabout diagnosis, the way it happened. And they're like, well, we still, now that we know it's there, okay, that's the area, but not knowing it's there, it wasn't really seeable. And the only way that we've really ever seen it is a PET CT. And there it is, bright, plain as day, but nothing else could really see it. And that's the nature of lobular. But I'll tell you something about the way I feel about lobular. And that is, people go, oh, well, yeah, you can't see lobular. I'm like, that's no excuse,
Oh, I agree.
right? I mean, somebody on Twitter said to me the other day, let's not blame lobular for the fact that our screening can't see it. I'm like, well, that absolutely. I mean, that's kind of a good way to put it. It's 10 to 15% of the breast cancers out there.
Yeah.
And if we can't see those at all, we've got a problem.
We've got a problem, and what we're working, I work very, very closely with a consortium of researchers right across Europe, the European Lobular Breast Cancer Consortium. So we've got a network of patient advocates who are all working together to raise the profile of lobular. And we also then link in with the Lobular Breast Cancer Alliance in the US. So in fact, the next ILC symposium, Leslie, maybe you'll make it up there, maybe you too, Robin, but it's going to be in Pittsburgh at the end of September. So I very much hope to be able to get over to it. And we've got amazing people over there like Steffi Oistrich and Adrian Lee and Matthew Sikora. And these researchers are all researching lobular as a unique entity and a unique subtype, which not only needs different treatments and different possibilities of treatment, but now we're also now beginning to hear them talk about we need better imaging.
Yes.
So
yes.
And for me as well, Leslie, this idea of lobular breast cancer being a sneaky breast cancer, that's out there. That's the narrative.
Yeah.
But that's not enough. It's not enough to say, well, we've got a sneaky breast cancer, so radiologists can't see it. Well,
right. So we dismiss it.
Yeah, no, we don't.
Yeah. We can say, yes, it's not all that seeable on our current imaging, but let's just not say, oh, well, it's sneaky. No, that's no excuse. I'm sorry. It just isn't.
We basically have to say, yes, it is a sneaky cancer. What are we going to do about it?
Right.
But okay, it's sneaky cancer, but just it's, to me, when you add the word sneaky to it, it's almost like a let off. It's like a get out clause.
Yeah, right. I mean, let's not dismiss it because it's different than the other,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's there's a lot of that out there, and it's just kind of like, oh well, yeah, it's sneaky and we can't see it. So I'm like, stop that.
Yeah.
Stop that right now.
But also, if when we know and we appreciate that mammograms like ours, it was so obvious that there was a huge level of density in my last screening mammogram. And how can anybody be, even 80% certain that there's nothing there? You couldn't possibly. I mean, I'd love to bring it up on the screen now. I can't. But I was over at the European Congress of Radiology in Vienna. I was asked to take part in a patient panel. Very privileged to get there, to be honest with you. I felt extremely, privileged. It's an overused word, but I really did feel honored to be there to listen to, some of the greatest minds in not only radiology, but again, in research. And people like Ritza Mann, who's the lead author on the European recommendations for screening women with dense breasts. So, I mean, I was absolutely in awe. But I have never come across so many people talking about dense breast density.
Good.
All of the imaging companies, they're all preparing for it. It's fact. It's not fiction. Sometimes in Ireland we're told, oh, that's an American thing. It's not an American thing. It's very much a global issue, and it is affecting thousands of women. And as Ritza said, it's not good to quote people, but I think it's okay to do this. Using MR or AI down the road when it becomes, part of our protocols and whatever, that's a long way off. But MR is there, and using MR to screen women with extremely dense breasts won't necessarily find less cancers. It will find cancer earlier. Yeah. So it'll allow women to avoid chemotherapy. For me, I mean, I had what they were saying, an unequivocal decision that I would have a mastectomy. And that was devastating for me, really, So not only do you have cancer, not only has it been missed on your mammogram, but now you're going to have a mastectomy, and there's nothing they can do to avoid that from happening. Well, if I'd had an MR, even if the ultrasound had been part of my protocol, had I been told I had dense breasts when I was in my late 40s, had I been told I had dense breasts when I had my biopsy done, had anybody said to me, look, you should have an ultrasound from here on in, there's absolutely no way that would not have, been part of my regular checkup. It's the lack of information, which I find unforgivable.
I think what you ladies are doing is changing the standard of care and changing the recommendations for, how to screen these women. For myself personally, I started getting my first baseline mammogram was at age 35 because I was high risk. So when I got diagnosed at 44, I had already had several mammograms. So I don't think that's the norm. And what I would love for you ladies to shed some light on is, let's think of a 26-year-old woman, a 35-year-old woman. How can these women know? Is there any way for them to, I think a lot of people, excuse me one second. I think a lot of people are very aware that we need to do our self-breast exams. Is there any way to tell, as a layperson, when we're doing our monthly breast exams, to tell if our breasts are just different? Is there any way to tell physically when we're touching them, are they dense?
No, there really isn't. I mean, people right now in the United States, they aren't even recommending self-breast exams. That's a whole nother question and story. But you cannot tell whether you're actually mammographically dense by feeling. You have to get a mammogram to really know that. And I think that's a good thing for you to bring up, Robin, because a lot of people think, oh, I'm dense or I'm lumpy or, but no, you cannot tell from that.
No.
And it's just something that everybody needs to know, that you can't tell. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do a breast exam,
Yes,
that.
I agree.
Because what that might do for us is you maybe can feel a difference from the way things used to be to what they are, when you're currently doing it. But you cannot really tell if you're mammographically dense or not by feeling.
Yeah, I agree, obviously, with Leslie, because we know that it's not palpable. And when I talk about a palpability, that was more in relation to the lobular that I had been growing there for some time. I mean, that palpability, I'm not relating that to the fact that I had dense breasts. I just happen to have both. Okay.
Right. So, yeah. Sure, that makes sense.
So density isn't palpable. But what I would say to the 26-year-old woman or the 35-year-old woman, I would say stand in front of a mirror when you're checking your breast. So do it in the, what do they call, the supine, and the, that's a medical term, but I was listening to them talking about it last week. So do it in your classic way, lying down and but also, and I don't hold with what's happening in certain jurisdictions where they're advising women not to self-exam. I think we should. And if you do it with good advice, but also stand in the mirror and get to know what looks right. Because oftentimes the breast can, change shape. And you just might pick up a change in that way. So it might just be a little bit lower than it used to be, or your nipple might be inverting that you mightn't spot it, but you may just see it in the mirror. But also by checking, you get to know what your breasts feel like. And that's important.
Right.
That for me is, I mean, I don't have daughters. I have two sons. But if I had a daughter, she would be starting her screening from very much earlier, but she would still have her mammograms. I am an advocate for women to continue to have mammograms, even though it didn't work for me. It does work. They do work. They are important. But I would be certainly showing her how to self-examine and do it on a monthly basis, the right time during their cycle. Get used to how they look and how they feel.
Yes. And our people don't realize our breasts change throughout the month, depending on our cycle. You know, as we get closer to having our cycle, they might get some swelling or tenderness. And it's just always good to just know your body and know what's normal for you. Because what's normal, well, I don't have breasts anymore, but what's normal for one, what's normal for one might not be someone else's normal. So just
really, that's right.
My best advice is get to know what's normal for you and your body and your breast tissue. So, okay, I have kind of a hypothetical question. Leslie, in a perfect world, if you could wave a magic wand and have everything be the way we feel would save the most women and get proper screening and early detection, what would that look like?
So the vision of My Density Matters is a world where breast density no longer hinders the early diagnosis of breast cancer. So when we created that vision and we talked about that, we said, okay, we're not the not-for-profit that takes people to get their mammogram. We don't raise money for them because of the financial toxicity. There's all those things are wonderful and we don't do them. We love it that other people do. Okay. So in my world, that's when I can stop. When breast density no longer hinders the early diagnosis of breast cancer. Now I'll step back from that and say, if we can cure this beast, let's do it, right? But that's not our MO, right? We are about making it such that breast density is not a problem with finding breast cancer. So that is processes, modalities, and the process, the standard of care that allows that to happen.
Exactly.
And I don't really think we're that close. For all of the talk about breast density, I'm so glad it's being talked about. I'm so glad that that was the topic of discussion at the European conference last week. Love it. And talk is cheap.
Put your money
all right. Let's take the talk now and make a world where breast density no longer hinders the early diagnosis of breast cancer. Robin, the United States military can drop a bomb right on this computer if they want to. We can send one of those cute little cars to Mars and it can talk back to us. I mean, that's nuts. Think about it. They do it. It happens. If we can do all of that, then we can have imaging and processes and protocols in place that work, that allow breast density not to hinder the early diagnosis of breast cancer. That's what a perfect world will look like to me, the area that we're talking about.
I agree.
I
was impressed last year, right around this time of year at the NCBC conference. And I think you were there, Leslie. That's where we initially met. Do you remember the gentleman's presentation about the AI that works with MRI imaging? It was fascinating to me because at the end of the day, radiologists are human, and they're looking at these imaging with human eyes. And what a blessing to be able to have technology that can detect what the human eye cannot on these images.
I agree. And we've got a ways to go to, for all that to happen. I think MR is part of the solution. I think there are other things that are also part of the solution because there are a fair amount of people that either can't or won't get an MR for a bunch of reasons that we don't need to go into. But, so we need a bunch of different ways to triangulate this. But all these things that happen that are like, oh, I need to go back in 6 months, or, oh, all the false positives and all that kind of stuff, that's all because our imaging isn't good enough. If our imaging was good enough, we wouldn't have all that going on. Right?
Our imaging isn't good enough, nor are the resources there in many instances. Okay.
Agreed.
So therefore, I mean, I asked a direct question at the conference last week. What can patient advocates do? What can we do to bring this, forward quickly? And basically it was to lobby. So it's back, you know, and that is because the research is done, the clinical trial is in, the DENSE trial has transformed, you know, the whole, what would we call the landscape of this. You know, there can be no more excuses because there is now a clinical trial. Up until then, it was, we don't have the evidence, we don't have this, we don't have that, we're waiting. You know, we have it now. We've always had it really, but now there's a clinical trial there as well. And MR may not be the solution, and nobody's suggesting that it is the ultimate.
Well, I mean, it's probably part of it. And I'm just saying, there's, you know, there's a bunch of different things, you know, that need to happen.
Lots of things. But for me, the solution, part one of the solution, is to God's sake, give the information out to the people who need it. So that we have shared, informed decision making. So women have ownership of their own information in relation to this. I mean, how on earth can we be expected to deal with this whole issue if we're not even been treated like you know, adults? You know,
and the excuse was always, well, we don't really have anything that we can do about it anyway, so why bring it up?
Of course you have. There's always been ultrasound. It's been there for as long as I can remember. You know,
MR is not young either. Like, it's been out there for a while.
No, and now instead of really taking the notification issue by the scruff of the neck over in Europe, we're talking about, you know, contrast enhanced mammography, and as I said, all of the imaging companies, this was the topic of discussion everywhere. That's
become it's interesting. It's becoming a marketing war a little bit. You know, who's going to win the dense breast thing, and I don't care as long as it works.
Exactly,
we gotta work though. You can't say that it works and it doesn't really work though.
You know what? I think there's something really important here though. Just the fact that everyone's talking about it is huge. Because like you said, it's okay, it might become a bit of a marketing war or whatnot, and we don't know who's going to win. Here's the thing. If it's a loud war, it doesn't matter who wins. People are going to know about it.
I don't care who wins, but I want a world where breast density no longer. I mean, it always goes back to that. I don't care how we get there. Really. But I want it to be as fast as possible. Let's just say
awareness is huge. And what you ladies are doing is so important because, I mean, we have your websites that have awareness on there, but you guys are even taking it a step further by participating in these medical conferences. And the one that I met you at last year, Leslie, this is where we're going to make a difference because it is a blessing to have both of your websites for the patients, for women to go look and find that information. But there's so many different groups that need to be aware of this, not just the patients. We need the MDs, we need the GPs, the OBGYNs, the breast surgeons, the radiologists, the ultrasound technicians. Multidisciplinary awareness is how we're going to get this out there. That's why I was so happy to have this meeting with you both today, because we're all doing everything in our own spaces, but we need to start partnering and lobbying and educating in these other, I mean, some of the things that I'm seeing in the communities that I work with are patient advocates partnering with doctors who are aware of this and want to make a difference. They're going to medical schools and they're teaching classes about these things, you know, these topics. And now it's leading to those classes are becoming where, you know, these medical students can get credits or other physicians can come and get continuing education credits. That's bingo right there.
And that's,
I agree with you. Go ahead.
Sorry, Leslie. I think that's one of the keys to get in there early, to get in there with your, I mean, I go into to University College Dublin and talk to radiographers. Okay, so they're, you know, so just getting them used to dealing with the patient, talking to the patient, whatever. But it's not just patient skills. It's you know, we talk about breast density, we talk about the importance of during mammography, we talk about, I go in and talk to pharmacology students because, you know, as I said the other day, they're mixing your cocktail when you're in for your chemotherapy, but they're interested. They want to know, you know, and even those who aren't interested, who are sitting down at the back, perhaps on their, you know, on their phones, by the end of the chat that you're having with them, you've engaged them, and the phones are gone down. You know, they're looking at you. They're learning, and they're learning from a real person. They're not just learning from a textbook or, you know, that diagram of, you know, the head and legs and body of a woman or whatever. They're able to ask questions. Those are things that stay with them right throughout their training, and they go out in the big bad world, and they, you know, they're also the people who are going to lead the charge, you know, because they don't have tolerance for this lack of use of technology and tools. And, you know, we have the tools, we have the imaging tools, Leslie.
Yeah. We do. We have, and there's more and more coming, which is great, you know. So let's throw everything at it. Yeah, I have a couple of things. One is with the partnerships. We're big on partnerships at My Density Matters, because we know that, you know, if we just, you know, get out on social media and do all the stuff that we do, the audience is limited. I mean, it's great, but it's limited, and we also might be just talking to each other, like, you know. So we need to get out there and find new audiences of all types of people, and let us not discount educating men on this too, because every single time I give a presentation or talk in a mixed audience, a mixed gender audience, the men are like, and they're texting their wives, and they're taking pictures of our stuff and sending it to their wives or their sister or whatever. And they are highly interested too, you know, because every man has a woman in his life.
Yeah,
you know?
well, you would hope so. Or maybe, maybe.
But I mean, for the most part, you know, like they're like, what? I didn't know that, you know, and they're off telling somebody about it. And finally, one thing about the younger women, the ACR, American College of Radiology, here in the United States, recommends that a conversation be had with your GP when you're 30 about your breast cancer risk. Who knew that, and who does it?
Very few do it, but also in my experience was that my GP at that time knew nothing about breast cancer.
Well, that's the problem, is they really don't. I don't think they know how to have a conversation.
And I'm not saying that as an assumption. He told me he didn't know. He actually, what he said to me, and I'd only been looking at information for about 2 weeks, and he said, look, you seem to know more about this than I do. And I thought, what? How's that even possible? You know, so we need to start. Look, it's not just about advocacy, it's about education. Robin, you just said,
right.
I think my biggest frustrations, it really breaks my heart to hear women, whether it's talking about dense breast or, you know, other issues that women don't know about. And then they come back after these surgeries, after their experience, and they say, my doctor didn't know, my doctor didn't tell me. We're working really hard in the spaces that I'm working in to get the FDA, who has the authority to issue these healthcare provider letters to practitioners, to make them aware. I mean, there's so much we can do, but you're absolutely right. Both of you are right. This is about education. We need to change the way we're educating the doctors. We need to change the way we're educating about the screenings. And who has the powers and the platform to do that? There are so many different ways. And Leslie, you hit the nail on the head. Partnerships with other organizations, because we are only 3 advocates. We can only reach so many people on the internet or social media or in conferences that we attend. But if we can get those tentacles out further and get that information out further, it's about educating the masses. And that's where you beautiful ladies and the work that you're doing comes into play. And it just melts my heart that I know the hard work of advocacy. I know how hard both of you are working to do this, and just appreciate so much all of that you're doing for women. if we could, I want my article to really reflect your wish list, if you will. And if I could put bullet points of what would you consider the best screening methods right now for women to ask their doctors to be aware of, because here's what I would like to happen. I would love for my article that I'm writing about your advocacy to reflect, let's say a woman goes in, her doctor didn't know. So what's a piece of information that is going to be in my article that this woman could give to her doctor so that the next patient coming in is going to get the right information? What are these screening methods? What's the best of the best, like the gold standard?
Well, MR, as we know it today, is considered to be the highest, I'll use regular people words, find rate. It finds the most,
So
as you say, though, I mean, MR doesn't really find more, it just finds it early. I mean, it might find more in any one instance in time, but it doesn't actually find more because it's going to be found eventually, even if it's stage 4.
yeah,
So this is one of the things that I want people to know. And something that I keep hearing out there is get your screenings to prevent breast cancer. Screenings do not prevent breast cancer. I wish they did, but they don't. They find it. And what we do with screening is to use screening to find it early.
But it's
While
it's not finding it early in enough cases. That's the point.
Absolutely
that's
not.
Why
That's the point of screening, is to find it early. But yes, in our case, because of density, it's not finding it early in a lot of those cases.
And also in the case of lobular. So it's not just density, it's lobular. It's, there's many reasons why. Look, what I would say is I would, not because they're European recommendations, but because they are the recommendations that have been informed as a result of the results of the DENT trial. So, so I would say to women, take a copy of those European recommendations in. And I know that they're being widely looked at in the US. And I know that there is a collaborative movement. It's not just Europe or the US. So I think those European recommendations are valid right across, and you'll see that with many of the radiologists. Yes, because in those recommendations, they're not yet guidelines, but in those recommendations, it says, all women should be notified about their personal category of breast density. That includes all A, B, C's, and D's. But for C and D, once you've got the information, you should be screened with MR.
Okay.
The move is to perhaps screen less regularly those that have A and B. That's not to quote. The other two were, but perhaps a move towards more personalized, more personalized screening, and perhaps less regular screening for A and B categories and more for C's and D's. So, and then it's not just about density, it's about all the other risk factors. Although density is considered to be one of the more significant ones, you've got age and you've got history of breast, history of previous radiotherapy to breast or previous biopsies. There's
Yeah. I guess I would answer your question this way, Robin. We have MR now, we have ultrasound now, molecular breast imaging. The Mayo Clinic has been using it for years to find, earlier breast cancers in women with dense breasts. It's not widely available, and there are other things happening. I don't think we're to the end of it, to the final answer where my vision is achieved with modalities. I think there's going to be other things that happen, maybe including something like a liquid biopsy, which is a blood test.
Absolutely.
We are not even close to being able to achieve the vision. But what we can do is have the conversation with our doctors, look at the guidelines, like you just said, and advocate for ourselves, because that's where we are. I don't think there's any one modality answer right now. I wish there was. That would be great, but I don't think there is.
But if you, as you suggested, what would we say to women right now?
Yeah.
That's what I would be saying to a woman right now. There's so
Mhm.
many things that may happen over the next 10 years, will undoubtedly happen over the next 10 years. And like Leslie said, we will have liquid biopsies. There's no two ways about it. We will have less screening and more personalized treatment. That is coming our way. Not maybe as quick as we would like, but it's happening.
Exactly.
But right now, take a copy of those recommendations. They're not guidelines. Take them in with you, have a discussion, and also remember that your GP, this is difficult for younger people because we think GPs are, there to answer all our questions. But GPs are general practitioners, and the word general is really important because they cover everything. They're not experts in any one thing. They're general practitioners for that very reason. So if you're concerned and you're not convinced that your general practitioner has enough information, ask them to refer you to somebody who can give you further information.
And who would that be? So if someone's seen their GP and they feel they need something further, what would be the next practitioner to recommend?
So if, again, hypothetically, if I had a daughter, she was 25, 30, I would be saying, ideally, and again, I have to put on this, sign saying, I'm not a medic, I'm not a radiologist, but if it were me as a mum, and with my experience, I would be saying, I'd like her to have a baseline mammogram now. So I'd like something there on record so that there is something to compare it to in the event that a comparison needs to be made in 5 years' time. Or, I would hope by then we'd have screening starting at 40, but we don't. We're starting screening at 50 here. Women in the UK are screened every 3 years.
Wow.
It's not nearly enough. And then if you try and have a debate around that, what happens in Ireland anyway, and I think in the UK as well, you're told screening is for well women. It's not for women with any kind of symptoms. So symptomatic mammograms and are diagnostic mammograms. Okay. They're not the same as screening mammograms. And then, the debate rages on. But it's very simple, in my view. Give the women the information, fall in with these guidelines that have been informed as a result of the DENSE trial, give us the information, and then follow up with the tools that are already out there, Leslie.
Oh, I agree with you. I'm not saying wait till everything comes, all the great stuff comes. I'm saying, if you do that and advocate for yourself, you have to do that. That's the number one thing, I think. Advocate for yourself, and kind of back where we started an hour ago, or where, is advocate for yourself and know your body and don't give up. Be empowered till you get what you think you need, because we know ourselves better than anybody else.
We do, and yes, a woman with a diagnosis, whether it's early or late, or stage 3, stage 1, stage 4, whatever, you're like a rabbit caught in the headlamps. You're a strong individual, Leslie, or you couldn't have done what you've done. Likewise, Robin, and I would say the same about myself. And I've always had this leaning towards advocacy. I worked with kids who had difficulties in learning difficulties in school. My mom would have been a really strong advocate for whatever it was that she believed in or was passionate about. But not all women are like that. So yes, advocate for yourself, but don't forget that we're a little bit unique insofar as that we're able to advocate. We've got lots and lots and lots of different ethnicities and different just populations who are unable, for whatever reason, they're unable to advocate for themselves. So
agreed.
we've got to get the information out to them. The information
Yeah.
must be made available. It's all about information and education and awareness.
Mhm.
And I think that's where
And
it begins and ends.
to your point, getting them the information and then getting them feeling empowered to do something, because I always say awareness is great.
Yeah.
Action gets the job done.
Yeah.
Like we can't just be aware of something and not do anything. We have to take that awareness and do something with it. And so, you know, we've got a ways to go here, but what I would say really in closing is, and one of the reasons why I do what I do is some of the doctors, radiologists that I work with, one in particular said to me, he's like, you know, if you ladies want this to change, you're going to have to be the driving force to do it, because otherwise it won't change.
That was this.
And
That
I
was
said to myself, game on then. If that's the way it has to be, then we'll do it. We shouldn't have to, but we do. So we will.
We will.
We will, but we still need these people to get on board, because when I think back, 2004, this was when Nancy started. 2009, it was signed into law in Connecticut that women would be informed. 2009, 2019, 10 years later, all these states in the US had laws in place through various different advocates. Wonderful women, but some of them were dying and literally dying on their feet as they went to the Senate. And in 2019, early that year, the FDA signed it into law. They're still debating the wording. You know, how will we do this? You know,
we don't have it yet.
It's just nuts. It's 2000. So the message loud and clear from the European Congress of Radiology, from the people who have written these recommendations, is lobby.
Yeah.
What's that telling us? Now it's becoming a political. It already is over there. It hasn't become such in Europe, but that's where we're going to have to go with this, you know. And that's not fair or right in 2023 that we should have to be taking this and making a political football out of it.
Absolutely agree with you. We shouldn't, but we have to. So game on.
Game on. Absolutely.
Ladies,
right?
It's been such a treasure to have you both today. And I just appreciate so much the information that you've shared. I'm going to definitely share your websites and all of the links that we've talked about today. But it is up to us. I'm so proud of what you are both doing, and I want to help you in any way we can at GPAC, and just kind of get that information out there, lobby, be our own advocates, and empower other women to do the same. So
and share the information, you know, share it out, give it out to your friends, you know. I mean, who knew that there were so many ways of saying the same thing? Certainly, you know, I've been doing this for 7 years and I'm still saying it and trying to find new ways to say it every day. But it does matter. It really matters. Yeah. Yeah.
It does.
And
thank you so much, Robin.
Thank you.
This is great.
Have a beautiful day
you.
and keep doing what you're doing, and we will make change.